All right, everybody, welcome to the One Thing webinar for July. Today's guest is going to be Ryan Levesque. We're going to be talking about the one thing for discovering the who, what, and why of your customers. If y'all are familiar with Gary Keller, and many of you are, you know that one of the things he said, for as long as I've worked with him, for 16 years, your business is your database. That's a fundamental belief that we have here in our company. That's what we teach everybody in our consulting, that your database is your business. It's that group of relationships that you have that are permission-based. These are people that are very, very hard for a competitor to take away. That's the foundation of everything that we do in business. And Ryan is going to share with us some techniques today on how to enrich that, how to make that foundation even better for our business. So super excited. The moment I saw his book, Ask, I was like, wow, this may be someone we want to bring on. And the book proved to be true. So again, Ryan Levesque, if you've got things to share while we're going on, you can do it tweet us to the One Thing Book or use the One Thing hashtag on your screen. But right now, I'm just going to dive in, do a little housekeeping so we can bring Ryan on as quickly as possible. So at the end of this, it'll be on your screen a few times. If you want to check out more from Ryan, you can go to askmethod.com. That is where you can find him, his products, and even, I believe, a free plus shipping offer on his book. That's how I ended up with it. Really quickly, I want to introduce Jeff Woods. He is going to be co-hosting. Jeff, why don't you say hi to folks?
Hey, everybody.
Jeff works with me when we launched our time blocking mastery course. He joined us from San Diego last year and has been working with me and Gary ever since. And he's going to be doing some of the hosting on these webinars going forward. So we're going to co-host today. It's going to be a kind of a co-pilot experience. So it'll be fun for all of us. Real quick reminder, I'm going to go over just a few things on the one thing, because every month we know that about 10 or 15% of you are just absolutely new to this book. You've come here because a friend told you to tune in. So I'll give you the big picture. Then we'll bring Ryan on. If you were here before this started, I was getting people to practice using the questions toolbar. If you can hear me, I'm just going to just say really quick, practice. Give us a yes. We're ready to go. Ready or yes in the questions toolbar, because throughout, boom, there they're coming in. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Austin, Bray, Julie. All right, tons. Awesome. Y'all are ready to go. Throughout this webinar, if you have a question for us, please type it into the questions toolbar. We have staff monitoring this. They will flag that for us. And at the end of this webinar, we will go to those specific questions and try to get them answered. So if you have a thought, wow, I'd really love to know this, just type it in as you go, and we will get to it by the end of it. So real quick reminder, what is the one thing? Fundamentally, many of you, you're in business, you're self-employed, you're entrepreneurs, you know the 80-20 principle. 80% of the results that we want are going to come from 20% of our efforts, is what that law states. I always just say the majority of what you want will come from the minority of what you do. And this book is really about saying, what's the 20% of the 20% of the 20% until you get to what number, Jeff? One, exactly. Because if you stop with your top priority, if that's where you start every day, you're going to be as productive as you can be.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. So that's the big idea. The theme here is about lining up your dominoes. If your first domino is your first priority, if you've really got them lined up and it's a leveraged action that you're taking, multiple dominoes are going to fall down. And we tell this story in the book. It's one thing to acknowledge the sense of priority, how lining things up really gets us ahead. It also acknowledges there is nobody on this webinar that has a to-do list of one today. That's just not reality. We have family, we have work, we have our hobbies, we have long to-do lists. And so lining up those priorities matters. And how we do it matters a lot. So the two records these are my favorite part for my kids. There's a group in the Netherlands that showed us how big this could be. They showed us that they could line up 4.5 million dominoes, and by knocking over one, got them all to fall down. Then we found in our research for the book that there was a guy named Loren Whitehead who wrote in the American Journal of Physics that not only could a domino run be about many things, it could be about more. He discovered that a 2-inch domino can knock over a 3-inch domino, can knock over a 4.5-inch domino, and so on. Basically, one will knock over another one that's 50% larger. And so you get this sense of momentum. And so the graphic that we have in the book that kind of illustrates what this looks like if you could just take it as far as you could take it. If you started with a 2-inch domino and they were growing at that geometric pace, by the 18th domino, it would knock over one as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. By the 23rd, it would knock over one taller than the Eiffel Tower. That's over 1,000 feet tall, people. That's like the Empire State Building. It's in that same category. By the 31st, you'd be higher than Everest, not just a little bit, 3,000 feet higher. And then by the 57th domino, that little 2-inch domino would have built up so much momentum, it would knock over a domino that would go all the way from the Earth to the moon. Why we tell this? That shape that you see on your screen, they call it a hockey stick, anything that grows geometrically. That we believe is the shape of extraordinary success. When you are doing your one thing over time, what begins kind of small, maybe not so impressive, will faster than you think become so big you can barely get your mind around it. In our experiences, most companies don't usually hit that growth curve until they're 5 to 7 years into it, and that's when they have the potential to explode if they've done their one thing. And our goal with these webinars and the book is that whenever you discover your one thing, for whatever it is you do, we want you to make it a habit. And so a habit, it does not form in 21 days. It doesn't form in 30 days, as we've often been told. The research we found showed that it takes 66. So it's just a simple lesson. Stay on it longer than you think. It takes a little bit more discipline than most people give it. But once you form a habit, you work for it, it can work for you for the rest of your career. And that's what really extraordinary results looks like. So today, I'm kind of breathless. Like, I want to get to Ryan, Jeff. I'm trying to let's hit those high notes. Let's get there fast. We talk about in the book all the places you can ask this question. And our theme this summer has really been, what's the one thing I can do for my business? And when we talk about building a database, as we did previously, when we talk about today, how to enrich that database by knowing who our customers are and what they need, this is one of those things that could very well be your first domino for your business. And it's one of the reasons we profiled it. So before I invite Ryan to unmute and join us, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him, because he's not the kind of guy who's going to brag on himself. He's a #1 best-selling author. His book is called Ask. It's a fabulous book, and it's actually his whole blueprint is right there. I think I picked it up for $5 on his website. He's been featured in Inc. magazine as the #1 marketing book of 2015, and by Entrepreneur magazine as the #2 must-read book for budding entrepreneurs. So his book has gotten a lot of attention, and it's definitely showing up in the business arena. He's used the Ask method himself to build multiple multi-million-dollar businesses in 23 different industries, generating over 100 million in sales in the process. And since then, his students have used the Ask method in thousands in different industries. So not only does he know how to do this and teach people how to do it, he's personally done it multiple times. I love that when someone brings great teaching ability and marries it with great experiential ability. Anything you would add to that introduction?
No, this is something that I have personally used, and I've been following him for over a year now. And I think it's the way business should be done. So we're excited to expose you to this method today.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Ryan, if you're there, I would love it if you would unmute and just say hi.
I'm here. Gosh, Jay, Jeff, I'm blushing right now, and I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to be here and have some fun over the next few minutes that we have together. So thanks so much for having me.
Cool. Well, again, I want to commend you. I'm pretty tough critic on books. And for me, a business book has to not only change the way I think about something, they've got to tell me what to do. So most people love to tell us what to think about things, but they're afraid to actually say, and this is how you do it. Reading your book, I mean, the whole second half of the book is the process. So I just want to give you kudos, because I just walked through and underlined and said, oh, this is what I have to do. And I just think that's very commendable. Most people are afraid, they don't have the abundance mindset to just really put it all on the table. So you nailed it. Thank you. There's some real quality there.
And I appreciate that, Jay. And it's in some ways I'm embarrassed that you chose this photo, but in other ways I'm actually really glad that you chose this photo for two reasons, because it ties into what you just said. So this photo here was taken about 4.5 years ago. And it was taken months before I landed in the hospital and got very, very sick. And I tell this story in the book. And were it not for getting very sick and almost dying, I almost slipped into a coma, That was the thing that made me come to terms with my own mortality and basically make a decision that I was going to hold nothing back, that I had this secret family recipe that had made me millions of dollars, and I could go one of two ways with this book. I could either make this book nothing more than a business card to get people to work with us, or I could give as much as I could in the pages of the book and just reveal what I consider to be my secret family recipe. And I'm about 45 pounds heavier now than you see me in that photo. So I look a little ill, but that's okay, because were it not for that, we wouldn't be here right now. And I think sometimes we have to come to terms with our life like that to decide what sort of impact do you want to make? What is your legacy going to be? And it's now or never, because we're not promised tomorrow. And if you're going to hold nothing back, just do it.
You know, I love that. And I love reading about your story and, you know, your discovery. I mean, if you'd gone another 24 hours or so, you could have just died. And how that became a tipping point for you to really give your life focus. And we've had a couple of people in our classes that Jeff and I have gotten to witness. And I can't remember who said it, Jeff, you might be able to remind me. But one person said, it shouldn't take a life-threatening event for us to understand why we're here. And so if you're hearing what Ryan just said, it shouldn't take that for us. We should be able to sit down and go, you know what? We just have to ask the question and really listen for the answer, because our life could be at stake in a very different kind of way.
Totally.
So Ryan, what's the center focus of the book if you had to bring people right in if they're not familiar?
Sure. So the book Ask is broken down into two parts. The first part is the discovery story, how I came across this methodology. And the second half of the book is the methodology itself. And so if you are the type of person that likes to just cut to the chase, I'm going to tell you right now, jump straight to part 2. And then you might want to go back to part 1 to understand the backstory behind it. If you're the type of person who likes to understand the story behind how something came into reality, then start with part 1. So what is Ask? What is the Ask method? In a nutshell, it is a methodology to figure out exactly what your customers want to buy before your customers even know what they want to buy themselves. And the secret is using a very unique combination of surveys and quizzes in a very specific way. And it really comes down to asking the right questions in the right way at the right time to the right people. Now, whenever I bring up the topic, and Jeff and Jay, I know you guys know this having read the book, but whenever I bring up the topic of Ask, people inevitably say, well, I get it, so you just ask what people want and give it to them, right? But the problem with that is people don't know what they want. And we have some famous people in history who are very quotable. People like Henry Ford, who's famous for saying, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. Right. We have people like Steve Jobs more recently who said, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And the reason why quotes like this ring true is because they are true. People don't know what they want. We don't know what we want. But there's one thing that we are extremely good and extremely accurate at knowing, and that is what we don't want. And the example I always love to give when we talk about this is, and I'd love to know this. So first and foremost, let's be true to Jay. And if you're on this webinar right now, pause whatever you're doing, hop on over to the GoToWebinar chat, because I'd love to know this. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to actually ask a few questions. So the first question I'd love to know is, have you read the book? So that's going to help me kind of shape the conversation, because I want to be respectful of your time if you have read the book. So if you've read the book, please just say read it. If you haven't read the book, in the comments just say haven't read it yet. I'd love to just kind of get a gauge for, let's see, not yet, haven't, yes, read the book. Hey, Barbara, read it. Thank you, Stephanie. Not yet, read it. John, haven't, have not, no, read it. Morgan, thank you. Not yet, haven't, not read it. Yes, haven't, have it. Great. Excellent. So it looks like, just eyeballing it, it's about 70% haven't read the book and about 30% have read the book. So that's great.
That's what we're seeing here too. Yep.
Excellent. Where I was going with this is, when it comes to I lost my train of thought. I was going to ask another question. I got so hung up on on the book question. So we're talking about knowing what your customers want, asking the right questions, and
And
this
they're
idea
better
of,
at identifying what they don't want,
yes,
and that's
I
where
know
you
what I was going to
get
ask.
to.
Yeah. So my question is this. In the chat, leave a comment if you've ever hired anybody before. If you've ever made any sort of hire on your team, your staff, an assistant, an outsourcer. If you've ever hired, just leave a comment. Say, yes, I've hired. I just want to get a sense. Yes, yes, yes.
Lots of yeses.
Yes. All right. Now the next question is, leave a comment, please, if you've ever fired somebody. You've ever had to let someone go, end an engagement, cancel a contract, fire someone. Use the word fired, just so I know.
You're
Hired,
fired.
hired. Fired. Yes, of course. Awesome. So this is a perfect, I want you to think back to the moment when you were hiring the person that you first hired, when you were hiring their replacement. So the first time that you hire for a position, we all go through this. We don't really know what we're looking for, right? Like, we kind of think we do. So we make a list and we say, okay, I want this person to do this and this and this and be like that and this and have these qualities and blah, blah, blah. But as soon as they get through the door, you realize, man, for the person who doesn't work out, you very quickly realize, okay, the next person that I hire, the person who replaces this person, I sure as heck know what I don't want the next guy to do, right? Or woman to do. I don't want her to be like this. I don't want him to do this. I don't want her to do this. We're really good at knowing what we don't want. And the reason for that is because when we ask ourselves, or we ask anybody, what is it that you don't want? You're asking them to access a part of their brain that projects into the past. When you ask someone what it is that they want, you're asking them to speculate and project into the future. And so this fundamental element right here is central to the ask method. And I go through this example because when people think, oh, it's just as simple as asking what my database wants and giving it to them, people don't know what they want. You have to go through the side door. You can't walk through the front door. The right questions to ask are not what you might expect, and in many ways they're counterintuitive. And I think this just sets the table for our conversation today as you think about how do you figure out exactly what it is that your customers want to buy from you, what they want to spend money on, how they want to work with you in a deeper way, so you ultimately can better serve your customers.
I think you hit it right there. And, this is something that we may have to ask better of the people on our list. If I had to guess, right, and this is where we probably could better employ your method, I think the vast majority of the people that are on this webinar are not so much selling a product as they are serving people. But when you understand what people's challenges are, and I'd love it if you would go to kind of like the heart of the deep dive. So if they only get one piece of information they can just employ with their database, we can absolutely give them that great question. But it is, right there that when you know who your customers are and what they need by asking that question the right way, you can actually not only sell them more, but you can serve them better.
Absolutely. Totally. So let's jump right in. So we talk about the deep dive. What Jay is talking about there is in the ask framework, there are a series of surveys. Each survey has a different purpose. And the first survey, the one that's fundamental to everything that we do, is something we call the deep dive survey. And within the deep dive survey, what I love about this webinar is there is one question. So we talk about the one thing. There's one question in the deep dive survey that's more important than any other question that you ask. And for that reason, in our world, we call it the SMIQ, or single most important question, SMIQ. Now, the SMIQ, if you were to just ask your database one question, and this only question, it did nothing else. If you walked away from this webinar and did just one thing, this is the thing to do. The single most important question, or SMIQ, is this. When it comes to XYZ, XYZ being the space that you're in, the challenge that you serve, that you solve, when it comes to XYZ, what is the single biggest challenge or frustration that you are running into right now? Now let's unpack that for a moment. So let's pretend, for example, you are a realtor. Let's pretend you're a realtor. And if you were to ask your database this question, it might be something like this. When it comes to finding a home that has everything you need in the budget that you're looking to stay in, what is the single biggest challenge or frustration that you are running into right now? Now the reason, let me unpack that for a moment. The reason why we frame it like that is when you ask this question, what it does is it identifies the single most pressing pain point that your customer is experiencing at this very moment. What it allows you to do is evaluate the responses so that you can separate those who have a serious problem and those who are less passionate about that question. And one of the ways in which we do this is by looking at the passion index and response length of the response of this question. So if you ask a question like this to your database and you say, when it comes to finding your dream home, I'll just shorten it. When it comes to finding your dream home, what's the single biggest challenge or frustration you're running into right now? What you're going to find is that some people leave you these big, long answers. They write you their life story. And then other people leave one-word answers. Well, the people who leave one-word answers, we don't pay attention to them. Because what they're telling us, it's a data point. It tells us that whatever question we've asked is not a priority in their life right now. Right? Whereas the person who leaves a very detailed, passionate response, this is someone we want to focus on. So Jeff and Jay at the beginning of this talked about 80-20, and then 80-20, 80-20, 80-20. What you want to focus on when you ask this question is what we call the hyper-responsive segment of your database. And that represents the top 20%.
This was
top 20% of responses that have the most, the highest score and the longest detailed answers.
This was a real eye-opener for me, Ryan, because I remember I've filled out quizzes and surveys before, and I've been the person who just said inventory, just one-word answer. And then there was a time when a question really struck me, where I was really passionate about that subject. I went on and on and on, and it's so easy to just look at the most common response instead of looking at the most engaged. I think that's a major shift. And for people who are walking away from here today, like, give yourself a return on an investment of your time. If you walk away from nothing else, it's that right there for me.
Totally. So there are three big mistakes that people make at a fundamental level when they ask their database or they run a survey to their database. So the first one we touched on, and the first big mistake that people make is they ask the wrong questions. They ask questions like, hey, what would you like to see? Right? What should we add to our product? What would you like to see us do next? And again, we talked about why that's a flaw. Psychologically speaking, you're asking people to project. You're asking them to project what they might want, and we're not really good at guessing that. And there are all sorts of biases that you create where you're actually training people to please the interviewer. They're going to say what they think you want them to say. But when you ask them about past behavior, when you ask them about their challenge, you're forcing them to look into the past. So that's the first big mistake. You want to make sure you're asking people what they don't want. And a great framework for that in this SMIQ is when it comes to X, when it comes to watering your orchids, when it comes to being more efficient, having higher productivity, when it comes to losing weight, when it comes to playing better tennis, what's the single biggest challenge or frustration that you have that you're struggling with right now? The right now piece is important because you want people to talk to you about what's happening right here, right now. So the first big mistake we've talked about, which is the wrong question, asking the right question. The second big mistake, Jay, is what you were just touching on, which is focusing on the wrong data. And the mistake that we make here, and this is the soundbite, so if you're taking notes, this is the soundbite that you want to write down, this is what you want to jot down in your notes, is this. Depth of response is more important than frequency of response. It's something that I call the myth of the FAQ. And so what you were talking about, Jay, a moment ago about these one-word responses is oftentimes, and I'd love to know, feel free to raise your hand. It's totally cool. We're in a safe place. We're all friends. If you've ever run a survey before to your audience, let's start there. Have you ever run a survey before to your audience, to your database, to your customers? Just, survey yes, survey no. Just leave a comment in the space in the chat.
While they're doing that, Ryan, I was just going to say that was Jeff, not Jay. This is Jay, and you haven't talked to us enough to distinguish that, and that'll probably help our other listeners. The other one is I think a lot of people, when they ask surveys, don't ask an open-ended question that allows people to show up as that really responsive customer that you just described. That's not a default for most people.
Totally. And it's and so why we make these mistakes is almost irrelevant, but we do. And so what ends up happening is this myth of the FAQ. So I'm just getting a sense for who's run surveys. No. A few people, yes. Survey, no. A lot of people, no, surprisingly. So this is great. So you have an opportunity for a huge win, a huge win. Right after you get off this call. You want to do like the quickest win right here, right now. You go to your database, you go to your audience, whatever, if that's 10 people on your list in your database or 10,000, the same applies. Send an email to your list and say, hey, I have been getting a lot of questions from people asking me about XYZ. And it's made me realize that there may be other people running into the same challenge. Would you do me a favor? And here's the key part. Would you hit reply to this email and tell me, when it comes to blank, what's the single biggest challenge or frustration you're running into right now? All you need to do is hit reply to this email with your response. Now, the hit reply mechanism, rather than asking people to actually fill out a survey, is so low threshold that someone can do it while they're standing in line at the bank on their iPhone. You are going to get a flood of responses, and the level of intelligence and understanding that you are going to pull away from those responses alone is going to be one of the most eye-opening exercises that you've ever done. This is something you've never done before. This is
Ryan,
super low threshold.
This is Jeff. I want to share one of my personal experiences when I wanted to start monetizing my database. I just took action based on what I thought they wanted. I put a lot of time and effort into developing something just to find it fall flat on its face because I never first sought to seek what they actually wanted. And it's kind of like you can do it the hard way, you can do it the easy way. Doing it the hard way is doing it on your own. The easy way is to go to your customers, to go to the people that you want to serve, ask them, and literally give them what they want on a silver platter. They do the work for you.
Totally. I mean, one of the secrets to the success that we've had in market after market is that this process eliminates guesswork. So whenever you're launching a new product, a new service, entering a new market, even developing a new marketing campaign, whenever you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're having to kind of take a leap of faith, the ask methodology, the ask method eliminates that guesswork. And there's something that's so important at an even more fundamental level for why I'm so passionate about this. And it comes to something that someone that I've studied has said about entrepreneurs. And if you've studied the work of Dan Sullivan that I first heard this from, that as entrepreneurs, and whether that means you are a solo business owner, a small business owner, you are a freelancer, you're on your own, or you're an entrepreneur inside your company. But the single most important thing that we need to protect as entrepreneurs is not our reputation, it's not our bank account, it's our confidence. Once you lose your confidence, everything else falls apart. And so our job as entrepreneurs every single step of the way is to make sure that we protect that confidence. And if we spend our days guessing, we're going to be guessing wrong. And every time we guess wrong, it erodes that confidence. So if there's a process, a methodology that can take the guesswork out of your decision making, then that process preserves that confidence and helps you forge ahead. So at a philosophical level, asking the right questions like this is, I think, fundamental to every single business, no matter what it is that you sell. So going back,
to get back to the 3 mistakes, there's a bunch of people that want you to repeat because you said it really well. Number 2. So mistake number 1 is they ask their customers what they want instead of ask for their biggest challenge.
Yeah.
What was number 2? It's they mistake frequency, or people
pay attention to frequency of response instead of depth of response.
Frequency.
So what I mean by that is they'll run a survey, they'll ask a question, they'll say, hey, I got 100 responses and 70 people, like I'll give you an example. One of the markets that we are in is in the orchid care space. We actually have a business, an education business, where we teach people all about caring for orchids. And we have about a dozen different courses. We have a book, we have a DVD series, we have training, we sell supplies, we sell jewelry. And in that business, when we first entered that market, any guesses? We'll put this to the chat. We ran a survey. When it comes to caring for your orchid, what's the single biggest challenge you have right now? Single biggest question or challenge? Leave a comment if you think, based on your guess, what you think the most common thing that we saw come up over and over again was. I'd love to know. Anyway, if you grow orchids, you care for orchids, if your mom or your grandma or your sister has orchids, yeah, Gary got it. Sheila got it. Sharon got it. Brooke got it. Stefan got it. One word: watering. And so we ran this survey to our small database, and we said, you know what? We've got a winner. We're going to create the ultimate guide for watering your orchid. We did it. We surveyed our audience, and we created a product based on the results of that survey. So we got to work. We put together this guide, and then we opened it up and released it to our audience. And then guess what? We sold 0 copies. And I thought, well, what did we do wrong? I followed all the steps. I did a survey, right? I asked what our audience wanted. But I made the mistake, that second mistake. See, when I went back and looked at the responses, the most frequent response that came up over and over and over again was watering. But here's what those responses sounded like. Watering. How to water. When to water. Watering. They were all 1, 2, 3-word responses. But when I went back and looked more closely at the survey responses in this exercise, I noticed that there was a much smaller group of responses. Their responses sounded different. They sounded like this. Hey, Ryan, you know, I've had this orchid, and every time that I bring an orchid home, it outgrows its pot, and I go to repot it, and every single time the thing dies. And I'm doing everything right. I sterilize my tools. I wear gloves. I use plastic pots. I know I'm not supposed to use glazed pots because the glaze leaches into the potting material, and I know I'm doing everything right, yet still, every single time I repot my orchid, it dies. What am I doing wrong? Now compare that response to watering. How to water. When to water. Now if we were to look at both of those types of responses, which do you think is more likely to buy a product if we create a program or product that solves their single biggest challenge? Of course, it's the repotting category, right? But the thing is, we get obsessed with frequency. And instead, and this is totally one thing territory, instead of what we want to do is actually ignore the vast majority of these short responses and actually focus in on the tiny minority that represent your passionate buyers. That's it. So the second mistake that people make, so the first mistake, we talked about the right question. Second mistake is you want to focus in on the top 20%, 80-20, top 20% of the most passionate, the most longest, most detailed responses that you get from your survey. And here's the kicker: ignore the rest.
Did you say ignore?
Ignore the rest. As uncomfortable as that is and that sounds, you actually want to ignore that market. You actually want to selectively ignore the vast majority of people who do not represent your most passionate, your most likely buyers for whatever it is that you're intending on creating or selling. And this is one of the most uncomfortable, most counterintuitive things that we all face in this process. It's sort of like, it's as uncomfortable as becoming a specialist, right? When you become a specialist, you selectively have to say no to things. And the example I always like to give here is if you wanted to become a doctor and your goal was to be as financially successful as possible, you could be one of two things. You could be a family physician. Family physician makes a great living, $100,000, $150,000 a year. and they see patients with all sorts of different conditions, right? Or you could be a brain surgeon at the Mayo Clinic who performs parietal lobe surgery and the only person in the world who does that one very specific form of surgery, and that is all you do. That physician makes $5 million a year. Which do you choose? And so the process, the exercise of selectively ignoring elements of a survey is uncomfortable, yet it is necessary if you want to serve in the greatest possible way possible.
So what's the third biggest mistake that people can make implementing this?
The third biggest mistake that people make, this one's fun, this one's interesting. I would love to put this one to a guess in the chat. So if you're familiar with my methodology, feel free to, you can cheat, you can throw it in here if you've been on any other training that I've done or you're familiar with my book, My World. The third biggest mistake is using the word, any guesses? Putting it to the chat, going once, using the word, see, we got please, don't, what, possibly, but, no, try, want, why, but, maybe, how, but, no one's got it yet, keep going, why, would like, hope, can't, if, help me.
Survey.
Wonder if I need, read their name, come on, someone get it, need, come on, I'm gonna have to give it up, 3, 2, 1.
Trump.
Down to the wire. Using the word survey. Here's the deal. We're talking about surveys here, but people hate taking surveys, right? When I use the word survey, it's like the least sexy thing in the world, right? I mean, it evokes images of, for many people, of being home at night with your family, eating dinner, getting a phone call from the auto repair center or some store that you frequented, and hey, would you please take a moment to give us your customer satisfaction survey right now? Ain't nobody got time for that, right? I mean, you hang up that call and you're done. No, thank you. People hate taking surveys. But what do people love giving you? What do people love giving? They love giving you advice. You see, when you ask someone, hey, Jay, Jeff,
Yep.
can I ask your guys' advice on something?
Yes.
Sure.
Immediately, I've positioned you in an elevated way. I've edified you. I respect you enough to ask for your advice. It's a sign of respect. And just think about the last time someone asked you for advice, right? Someone came to you and say, hey, I'm in a tough situation right now. Can I ask for your advice? Immediately, your ears perk up, you shut down everything that you're doing, and you say, absolutely, I'd love to. So when you're framing these questions that you're asking to your audience, the very worst thing that you can do in your email is say, hey, will you do me a favor and take this quick survey? Please do not do that. That email will be closed faster than you can even send it. Instead, your subject line, here's a writer-downer for you. Subject line, dear first name, can I ask for your advice on this? It'll be one of the most opened emails that you send to your database. See, I go through this because on the surface, when we talk about ask and asking, it feels like, well, it's just as simple as ask people what they want and give it to them. But in reality, there are about 75,000 little nuances like this that make all the difference in the world. And we've covered 3 of the big ones in the last few minutes. Asking the right questions, and we talked about the SMIQ, single most important question. Next up, we talked about the importance of focusing on depth of response and instead of frequency of response, focusing on the top 20% of responses, what we call the hyper-responsive survey takers. And then we talked about mistake number 3, and that's using the word survey and what to use instead. And to instead ask people for their advice instead of asking them to take a survey. So if you just start with those 3 pieces of information, and immediately after we get off this call, you fire off an email to your database and say, when it comes to X, X being the problem that you solve in your business, when it comes to finding your dream home, when it comes to caring for your orchids, when it comes to losing weight, what's the single biggest challenge or frustration that you're facing right now? Will you do me a favor and please, all caps, hit reply to this email to let me know? It would mean the world to me, and it's going to help me better serve you as a customer.
I love that. And, we had a couple of people asking the questions. You just gave us a subject line, which was one of the requests for that email to get people, I need your advice. I need your help. The other one was, if you going with this realtor category, because we do know that we have a lot of real estate agents and business owners on this webinar. If you have a big database, some of the people I work with have tens of thousands of people in their database and thousands of past customers, but all the buyers and the sellers and the current homeowners are mixed together. Do you try to ask them different questions, or you just do for when you think about real estate, do you just try to come up with a question that fits them all?
Yeah. So, okay, great. So we're getting into some nuanced kind of scenario-specific situations, right? And so I'm happy to go. Let's go into that one. So in that very specific situation, if you had a database of a few thousand people, and some are buyers, some are sellers, some are real estate agents, and they're all mixed together, then what I would do there is I would, instead of asking people to hit reply, I would ask them to click on a link, and I would actually make this a clickable link where you're asking a few survey questions. And there's a bunch of tools on the market to do this. You can do a Google form, which is totally free. We have a software product that allows you to do this. There are many survey tools on the market. So you ask people to click on the link. You click on this link and tell me what's your single biggest challenge when it comes to whatever. So I would do that. We'll get to the wording of the exact question in a moment, but I want to just jump one step forward. When they click on that link, instead of starting with the single most important question, the open-ended question, instead I would ask them a closed-ended multiple choice question which says, which of the following best describes you? I'm a homeowner looking to sell. I'm a homeowner looking to purchase. I'm a real estate agent, and whatever the other categories might be, right? So you're asking that first, and then when they click the next button after asking that first question, the next question then becomes that big open-ended question. And because you're asking them to tell you who they are first, you can conceivably ask 3 different open-ended questions, different questions based on how they answer the first question in your survey. Does that make sense? So you might ask...
Total sense, Ryan. And I've used a few of these tools, in our amateurish fashion, and they're all set up so that based on what they say selling or buying, it's very easy to branch a survey. It's not very tough to learn how to do. And we actually had someone comment in the questions. I don't know if you saw that. This is all common sense stuff. And I love that comment, and I wanted to highlight it earlier, but you just said it. It is common sense stuff, but people don't do it. Business owners don't do it. And sometimes the most important things we can do for our business are very straightforward and actually kind of simple, but they will really, really deliver a lot for us. And so thank you for giving that little nuance, right? That one additional question so that we can actually segment our audience just a little bit to know which of the different groups need what.
Totally. So then the way you frame the email in that case might be something like, I've been getting a lot of questions from buyers and sellers and even real estate agents recently about some challenges that they're running into in the market. Based on where you are right now in the current real estate environment, you take a moment and tell me what's the biggest challenge or frustration you're running into right now, right? So you make the question generic enough so that it applies to all the different, what we call in my world, buckets of people in your world. And so we might have 3 buckets here: homeowners looking to buy, looking to sell, and then agents. And then from there, you take them to that multiple choice question. And then from there, you might ask one of 3 different open-endeds. So for the real estate agent category or bucket, you might phrase that question as an agent in the market, what's the biggest challenge you're running into finding buyers or finding sellers, whatever the most appropriate question might be. I think that hopefully helps that very specific scenario.
Yeah, it does, and I appreciate that. And when I was going through the book, I was asking that question, and I think I shared with you when we were preparing for this. I know there's a lot of people in the personal fitness, and I was role-playing in mind, going through the steps for our business our time blocking business, and just the buckets, a lot of us kind of know if we had to ask that segmenting question, most of us kind of know how to do that. It is fairly common sense. If you're a trainer, people want to add muscle or they want to lose weight, or, there's probably a few categories that you're kind of aware of, and you can really get to the truth of what your customers need really quickly.
Right. So absolutely. And that's it. I'm glad we had this conversation because it truly is common sense and it's human nature, right? So I think many of you on this call, if you're in a business or an environment where you're interacting with people face to face on a regular basis, this is how we naturally react. Like, this is how we naturally interact with other human beings, right? When we go online for some reason, and when we look at I see people's websites, I see this all the time in the real estate space, it becomes a one-way shouting match. There's no questioning. It's just, here's who I am. I'm amazing. Here are my credentials. In the real estate business, I've sold 40 million houses in the last, 30 years, whatever. I've been doing this forever. Look at my pretty face. And it's all the same. And the opportunity to differentiate yourself is by saying, hey, listen, I don't know if I can help you yet, to be perfectly honest, but here's what I do know. If you take a moment to tell me a little bit about your situation, what your challenges are, what you're struggling with, and answer just a few simple questions, using that information, I'll be able to tell you if I'm a good fit to work with you or if I think there's a better option out there for you. Immediately when you do that, that's how people want to be communicated with online. That's how people want to be sold, right? And there's a huge opportunity for anybody who takes that approach on your website online and kind of conveys that same experience that someone might have if they were to work with you one-on-one, and allowing you to reach thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, depending on your business. The environments that we're in, so we do this online, and we didn't talk a lot about the lead generation side of this, but when you apply this to lead generation, Jay mentioned that I'm personally in 23 different markets. We generate over 100,000 email subscribers daily. That's every single day, using the surveys and quizzes that we have in these different markets. And so I say that not to brag, because this has been my obsession for the last 10 years of my life. So if you knew the number of hours that I've spent obsessing over this, it's far more than the 10,000. So it's not a bragging at all. It's to show you, to inspire you, the potential that is available. So even if you're able to do a fraction of that, gosh, 100 people a day or 1,000 people a day, the type of impact that can have both on your bottom line, your income, but also the type of impact, the number of people that you can reach in whatever it is that you do and who you serve.
So Ryan, let's do this because we've got about 12 minutes left, and I want to shift over to Q&A because we've had some really good questions coming in, and that way we can dive into adding specific value to people.
Sounds great. Hey, folks, and on the screen, if you're wanting, I saw several people saying they were going to get the book. Check out askmethod.com. There's a lot of insights in there. There's if you've read the book, you've got tools on there for folks, right, Ryan?
Totally. If you've already read the book, we have a free PDF download, which is the Ask Method Blueprint. So if you like mind maps, it's a 13 or 15-page mind map that walks through all the different pieces and how everything fits together. If you haven't had a chance to check out the book, I think we've got a 26-page free PDF that you can check it out. So try before you buy. And if you're, if you're a big spender, we have the opportunity to get a free copy of the physical book. All we ask is that you pay the few dollars shipping and handling, and we'll ship it over to you anywhere in the world. So there's a couple different options for anyone who wants to dive deeper. If you're on the phone, if you're in the car right now, you're not in front of a website, the book title is as easy to remember as possible. It's Ask, A-S-K. You literally go to Amazon tonight. Look it up. It's going to be there. You can find it in Walmart, your local bookstore, airport bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and international bookstores as well. So it's pretty easy to find. And that's a great first step for anyone, if you're listening to this and you're like, I kind of like to go deeper. I'd like to read in addition to this. It's a great option. So yeah, let's switch it up to Q&A, and happy to help.
So first question, just to recap what the mistakes are, bullet point because people are still asking.
Totally. First mistake, asking the wrong question. Second mistake, focusing on the wrong data. Third mistake is using the word survey.
Great.
Next question, do you recommend an intro video for that offer on your homepage or just written plain text?
I think it really depends on your business. And so if you are in a relationship business where you are the star, where people are buying you, then to establish that credibility, absolutely. Put yourself on video, smiling face. If you are a product-based business, then the product is the hero. And you might not necessarily need a video of yourself. Generally speaking, I found that markets that are demonstrable, so markets that have a demonstration component, I'll give you an example. In the tennis training space, that's one of the spaces that we're in, so online tennis education, absolutely. You want to have a tennis player on a tennis court swinging a tennis racket on video, right? Another example would be in the health space. We found, helping people lose weight, get into better shape, things like that. Surprisingly, text only performs better. So it is one of these things, if we were to go deeper, it's a great thing to test. And what I would recommend if this is your first time putting something like this together is start with whatever is going to get you going faster. It's not about getting it perfect. It's just about getting it going.
So the next one, when would you recommend asking for people's contact information?
I love asking. So contact information can take different shapes and sizes. So at the most basic level online, typically we're talking about someone's email address. Every additional piece of information that you ask is going to suppress response. So if you ask for what's your first name, what's your last name, what's your email address, what's your phone number, what's your zip code, what's your social security number, the more fields you ask, the lower response you're going to have. So here's one of the things we haven't talked about, but in the methodology that I teach, I spend a lot of time. So I have a background in neuroscience. That's what I studied in college. So I went to Brown, studied neuroscience, worked on Wall Street, and then took the methodology around kind of combination of finance and psychology and applied it in this way. So one of the things that I've spent a lot of time studying is the psychology of fear. And there's a researcher out of California, his name is Dr. Robert Maurer, and he spends a lot of time talking about how to overcome people's fear response. And one of the ways to do that is to what we call hack the fight or flight response. So we all know the fight or flight response. And the way you do this online, I'm answering your question, Jeff, but with a little bit of background into why I'm going to say what I'm about to say. The way to hack someone's fear response, when someone gets to your website and you ask them for contact information, immediately it triggers off their fight or flight warning response. They fight or they flee. And that's why people bounce from your website. That's fleeing from your website. So the way to hack that fear response is to shrink the size of the step or commitment you're asking people to make. So instead of directly asking someone, what's your email address? If you start by asking one or more multiple choice, non-threatening questions first, it actually flies below the radar of someone's fear response and builds action-taking momentum. So as counterintuitive as this sounds, instead of saying, what's your email address as the first step, if you just ask a multiple choice question, which of the following best describes you? Are you looking to buy a home or are you looking to sell your home? Click next. Asking that additional question before you ask for their email address actually will increase your response. It'll increase the number of people who give you their email address because you've started with this low threshold, what we call micro commitment question. So the right time to ask for someone's contact information is after you've started with the low threshold multiple choice questions. Think about it. It's shaking hands before asking for the first date.
I loved in the book, Ryan, where you talked about this, because you talked about at the very end asking, you sometimes like to reach out to people who've taken, who've given us this advice or taken the survey. I'm gonna botch your language, and talk to them. Would you be willing for us to contact you to find out more? And the people who put their phone number became some of your highest rated. For someone to give you that information means they're very invested in the process, the service, or the product that you might be building.
Oh, totally. It's a great data point. Just think about it. How unwilling are you to give someone your phone number, right? I am so unwilling. Very few people have my phone number. For me to give my phone number filling out a form online, it means that that thing is really stinking important to me, right? Like, it is really important. So it's another data point that you have to measure how responsive someone is. Now, talking about language, since we went there, Jay, when you ask someone for their phone number in the context of a survey, there's very important language that you want to make sure you use, and it goes like this. Lastly, I may want to follow up with a handful of people on the telephone to learn a little bit more about your situation. This is the important part. So this is what you want to write down. Would you be open to getting on the phone with me on the condition that I promise not to sell you anything? On the condition that I promise not to sell you anything. This is an information gathering call. It is not a thinly veiled sales call. You will erode all trust with your audience if you use this as an underhanded way to try to sell someone on your thing.
I love that.
It's important that you stick with that.
So we got about 4 minutes left, people. We're going to have time for one or two more. One really good one, Ryan, from Matt. He said, how would you go from determining what the challenges people have are to what specific solutions in the format of those solutions or products should be, like course, video, ebook, whatever it is?
Totally. So that's our job as entrepreneurs. It's our job to understand the problems better than our customers understand the problems themselves. It's our job to identify the trends, the buckets, the segments that exist in your market. And what you'll find when you do this process right, and you have enough survey responses, the experience is almost akin to, if you've ever been to New York City, and if you've ever stood in Times Square, and you just stood there, and you just kind of stand still through all the chaos, and you kind of let the blur wash over you, and it's a sea of color, a sea of chaos. You don't remember every individual face that passes you by. There are a few that stand out, but by and large, what you notice are trends. You see these trends, these dots, and your brain starts to naturally connect these dots in these ways to see things that you otherwise wouldn't. And when you're going through this ask process, that is exactly what you do. You stand in this sea of data, you let it wash over you, you put it in overnight processing into your mental crock pot, you go to bed, you wake up the next morning, and you see things you did not see before. And the solutions arise out of the challenges that you notice.
Ryan, we've got time maybe for one more before we wrap this up. There's like 4 people asking, and this is like the great question in no matter what industry. What do you use for your actual database? Is there a platform that you recommend over others?
Gosh, that is such a great question that constantly changes. So I can tell you what we do in our business. So
fair enough.
Sorry?
I said fair enough, because it's a moving target. It seems like everybody is unhappy with theirs and looking for a new one.
That's it. And I will be very polite in the way that I say this, but if this were a rated R telecast, I would say it's what flavor of bleep sandwich do you want to eat? Because every single one has problems. It's just a matter about what problem you want to live with. So what we use for our database, for the size of our company, we use Infusionsoft, and we combine it with a platform that sends email called Maripost. So Infusionsoft is our CRM in our marketing business, so our ask method business. In the other markets that we're in, we use platforms like Aweber, GetResponse. We use ExactTarget. We have one business that uses Salesforce and the CRM there. So it really depends on the size of your business. But again, I think people become infatuated with technology, and we spend so much time obsessing over that we don't focus on the overall principles. So if you've got something that works for you now, whatever you switch to, the switch is going to be painful. I can tell you that now because I've gone through many switches. And if I were to throw some specific names in the ring to consider that you might not be aware of, take a look at ActiveCampaign. That's a company that's on the rise, and I think that's a good one to start with, besides the names that we've already talked about.
Yeah, Jeff's real familiar with that one, and I've looked at ConvertKit as well. There's some good products, but ActiveCampaign is really good.
ConvertKit's another one. ConvertKit is on the rise. I know Nathan Barry, their CEO, and that's another great one to consider as well. And they're low cost too, so they're not going to set you back thousands of dollars to try them out.
Awesome. That's great. That's a good range we have people at all points of the globe. So it's really funny is I'm going to wrap this up. And one of the things that's going to be written on the screen is we're going to ask people to take a survey, which will be changed between now and the next webinar, which will be very fun. But Ryan, first, I just want to thank you. I know that you've been in the middle of a launch. You took time out of a very busy, successful business to share with us today, gotten tons of people saying how great this was and how much they've appreciated it. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, guys, Jay, Jeff, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. I know how selective you are in bringing authors and speakers, so I'm just really grateful and hopefully was able to add as much value as possible in the short time that we had, and thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yep, you nailed it, man. And the simple but really impactful steps that you covered today, and also the mistakes that we've now taken, hopefully, out of the way for folks. Doesn't matter if they're on Gmail and that's their database. They can do those things today. So thank you, because it's implementable for everyone here. Quick reminder, folks, we would love your advice on how we can do this better. So please answer the questions when you get that survey request, which we will relabel later. This is all recorded. And so you will get a recording of this. If you want to go back and listen to the last 5 minutes when Ryan was rattling off those different databases or his scripts, it is recorded. You will get an email of the recording, and we will post it to theonething.com/webinars. Mark your calendars. Our next guest is John Assaraf. That's going to be on August 30th. Tell them really quickly who John is if they don't know.
So if anybody's ever seen the movie The Secret, John was in there. He's one of the leading authorities in the world when it comes to retraining your brain and attracting the things that you want in your life. I've been following him for years now. Just a really sharp guy, and I think it'll be a really good switch up from the path we've usually gone down. You'll learn a lot. Awesome.
So definitely don't miss that. As always, you can reach out to us on the social media. Definitely check out Ryan at askmethod.com. I read the book, and it's a playbook, and I really don't say this very often. It's definitely worth, gosh, the deal he has on his website is like $5 shipping and it's free.
Yeah.
It is such a value. I really did enjoy it, and we're using it as a playbook here. So I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being part of our One Thing family, and we'll see you next month.